There are abandoned places that frighten you, and then there are places that remember you. The old Breckenridge Asylum was one of them. People said the building listened. They said the walls breathed. They said if you stood in its hallways long enough, you'd feel a cold hand grip your wrist even though no one was there. But the most terrifying stories weren't about the screams heard at night, the shadows moving behind boarded windows, or the strange lights flickering from empty rooms. No, the real horror was the truth that had been buried for almost a century. Patients didn't just die inside Breckenridge Asylum, they vanished, and their ghosts, according to those brave or foolish enough to enter, never left. This is the forgotten story of the asylum, where disappearances were routine. Doctors were feared, and the spirits still walked the halls searching for justice. The old asylum, Breckenridge Asylum, stood alone at the edge of a dying town, surrounded by a forest so dense that sunlight barely reached the ground. Even when the hospital was active, people hated going near it. Its walls were built from dark stone, its windows narrow and shadowed, and its doors creaked as if they resented being opened. Inside, the air always felt colder than it should, and patients complained that the building seemed to whisper to them. When it first opened in 1921, Breckenridge promised to be a breakthrough institution for mental health treatment. But within months, rumors began to spread, rumors of patients screaming through the night, of strange new experiments performed without consent, and of individuals who were admitted but never seen again. When families asked questions, they were told calmly, firmly to stop asking. It was as if a curtain had fallen over the asylum, hiding something monstrous behind it. Years passed. Fear grew, and then one day, without warning, Breckenridge shut its doors. Staff disappeared, patients were relocated in silence, and the building was abandoned. No official statement was ever released. It was simply over. But the silence didn't last, because soon the town began hearing the stories. The first night of fear, people whispered that anyone who walked too close to the asylum after dark would hear footsteps following them, even when they were alone. Some claimed they heard a woman crying. Others said they saw the silhouette of a man standing at the highest window, staring down at them. But the most disturbing tale came from a group of teenagers who broke in one October night, decades after the asylum closed. They didn't find ghosts first. They found something worse. A room filled with hundreds of patient files, each stamped with the word missing. There were notes, scribbled in the margins in frantic handwriting. Descriptions of unexplained behavior, reports of unapproved testing. Mentions of a locked basement no one was allowed to enter. And then there was the record that made one of the boys vomit right there on the dusty floor. Patient 441st. Date of disappearance unknown. Last seen screaming, dragged into the East Wing by staff wearing masks. When they tried to leave the asylum, they found the door wouldn't open. Every other exit was locked. The hallways grew darker. Something scraped across the floor behind them. A shadow moved at the end of the corridor, and then just as suddenly as it had begun, the front door swung open. They ran home and refused to speak of it again. The town laughed at them, called them dramatic. But something had changed that night, because the asylum wasn't silent anymore, and what lived in its halls wanted to be heard. The doctor behind the darkness, if the asylum was the body, Dr. Eliot, Thorne was its beating heart, and no one who knew him ever forgot him. Cold, calculated, brilliant, and feared. Thorne had been the asylum as chief medical director from its opening until its sudden closure. He believed in progress, but his version of progress frightened everyone around. Thorne hated traditional therapy. He believed the mind could be rewired through extreme methods, isolation chamber, chemical submersion, and sensory deprivation that could last for days. Patients who resisted were labeled violent and dragged away. The staff was terrified of him. The patients were his victims. It was Thorne who created the East Wing, a forbidden area where only he and a few loyal assistants were allowed to enter. Patients who went into the East Wing were never seen again. When questioned about missing patients, Thorne simply smiled and said, "Breakthroughs come at a cost," and those who continued to question him were fired. Or worse, they vanished just like the patients. No one knew exactly what he was doing. But decades later, when investigators finally broke into his private office, they found sketches, not of treatment methods, but of human anatomy, torn apart, rearranged, redesigned. Thorne wasn't trying to cure minds. He was trying to control them. The vanishing of 1938, the asylum's darkest year, was 1938. That winter, a massive snowstorm sealed off the town. Roads were blocked, communication lines failed, and Breckenridge Asylum was cut off from the world. When the storm finally passed 2 weeks later, rescue teams rushed to the building expecting chaos. They found something far worse. The asylum was empty. Every staff member, every patient, every doctor, gone. Food was left on plates. Beds were still warm. Some chairs were knocked over as if people had left in a hurry. The only trace of life was a single message written on a hallway wall in dark red, so dark the rescuers insisted it wasn't paint. He took them. Who was he? No one knew. Because Thorne was gone too. Not a single person who entered the building during that storm ever came out, and because no bodies were ever found, the missing patients were never declared dead. They simply disappeared from history. The paranormal investigator in 1987, nearly 50 years after the disappearance, a widely known paranormal investigator named Lydia Crane arrived at the asylum determined to uncover its truth. She wasn't afraid of ghosts. She'd spent her life chasing them. But Breckenridge was different. Breckenridge felt alive. On her first night inside the asylum, she recorded something that would later become infamous. The recording began with her calm voice describing the hallways, but minutes later, her tone shifted. She whispered, "Someone's behind me." There was no one in the footage. She whispered again, "I hear footsteps. Slow, dragging." Then she screamed a full, terrified scream. But the camera never fell. It continued rolling. It continued walking, as if someone or something had picked it up and carried it down the hallway, while Lydia begged for help off-screen. Her final words on the recording were, "He's still here." Lydia Crane was never seen again. Her camera was found 3 days later at the entrance to the East Wing. But Lydia herself had vanished just like the others. The new owner in 2011, a man named Jacob Marner, bought the land for cheap, planning to convert the asylum into a luxury hotel. He didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in disappearances. He believed in money, nothing more. Workers warned him that the building was unsafe. Locals warned him that the building was cursed, but Jacob didn't care. On his first night staying inside, he called his wife, sounding confused. "I feel watched," he told her. "There's someone here." She asked him who. Jacob whispered, "I think it's a patient." The call disconnected. The next morning, workers found Jacob's car still outside, the lights on, the keys inside. But he was gone, leaving behind only a single message scribbled on the floor of his temporary office. They never left. The project was abandoned instantly. To this day, Jacob has never been found. The final discovery 2 years later. A team of urban explorers entered the asylum looking to create footage for their channel. Their video was never uploaded, but rescuers found their equipment months later, and the footage told a story no one was prepared for. In the basement, an area believed to be sealed forever, they found a massive steel door. It was unlocked. Inside were dozens of narrow metal beds, dozens of restraints, dozens of medical tools stained with something dark, and at the far end of the room, a wall filled with carvings, not names, not dates, hands. Hundreds of handprints scratched into the stone by people desperate to escape. One of the explorers whispered, "These are the missing patients." And then the temperature dropped. Their breath turned white. A low moan filled the room. When they turned back toward the door, a shadow blocked their exit. Tall, thin, human-shaped, and wearing what looked like an old medical coat. The footage ended there. No bodies were recovered. The ghosts still roam today. Breckenridge Asylum still stands untouched, rotting, and avoided by everyone who lives nearby. People swear they see figures in the windows. Hikers report hearing metal doors slam from inside the building, even though the asylum has no electricity. But the most disturbing reports all describe the same thing. A tall shadow in a long coat, walking the halls as if on rounds. Patients were lost inside that building. Patients were betrayed inside that building. Patients died inside that building. And the one who took them, whatever he became, still hasn't left. Some believe it's Dr. Thorne, trapped between life and death because of the horrors he created. Others think the building itself has become a prison for the souls who vanished within its walls. But one thing is certain, if you ever find yourself near Breckenridge Asylum, don't look too closely at the windows, because something there is always looking back, and it remembers every face that crosses its path. It remembers every voice, every footstep, every heartbeat. Breckenridge doesn't forget, and it never forgives.